This is my farm.
Don't come out here and tell me what I need.
I need solutions that work and market options that are worth my time.
Small town support that sees the bigger picture.
A global network that empowers us. A co-op that's there for us every day.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse's Phil Brasher, as well as this week by Georgia Republican Austin Scott. And Congressman Scott, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time to join us on kind of a wide variety of subjects that we're planning to discuss here. And first one, want to be a piece of legislation that you've been working on relating to the spending and borrowing authority for the Commodity Credit Corporation. Obviously, with the MFP payments of the last couple of years and with COVID happening this year, a lot of folks paying special attention to that borrowing authority. And the chairman of the committee has said he's looking, if there's going to be an increase on that borrowing authority, to give some additional authority to Congress in terms of how the Department of Agriculture chooses to spend that money. With the Senate looking to consider coronavirus aid legislation in the month of July, how do you anticipate, or what are you expecting in terms of the conversation surrounding your legislation and the broader issue of the CCC borrowing authority?
Sure. So right now the borrowing authority is around $30 billion. It's what it was set at in the late 80s. To put that in perspective, I graduated from high school the year that borrowing authority was set. I'm 50 now, and so what we're trying to do is update it to the $68 billion level, which is where it would be if you would simply put a cost of living adjustment on it. Colin Peterson, the chairman of the Ag Committee, who's a good man, been very supportive of agriculture. He has expressed concerns that if the House Ag Committee does not have more input into where the funds actually go, then he has serious reservations about the legislation. So he's a good man. I hope we're able to continue to work through and dialogue with him and see if we can find some common ground, because we need to get that borrowing authority updated to the higher levels, because we've got some real problems coming in the farm communities. If you look at the prices that we're facing today with virtually every commodity group out there, they're reaching the low points in the last decade or so. And so I don't know many commodities that you can actually grow today and make a living for what you're getting out of the commodity. So hopefully we'll get it updated. I hope it gets adopted in the Senate at the $68 billion level. And Colin's a reasonable guy. Maybe we can work through some language and get that in the bill as well.
Congressman, Chairman Peterson had indicated that at one point that he thought whatever comes out of the Senate and winds up going to the president will probably, the ag provisions are going to look a lot like what was in the House bill, the HEROES Act that Democrats passed without Republican support back in May, because of the, obviously a lot of issues besides ag for Republicans in that bill. Where does that fall short? What specifically, besides the increase in CCC, the CCC limit, what do you need to see in that? What comes out of the Senate, and what, most importantly, what eventually goes to the president? What does ag need there beyond what the House bill had?
Let's keep in mind, of the almost $2 trillion that was adopted, $2 trillion that was adopted in the last piece of legislation, only 23.5 billion of that $2 trillion actually went to support the farmer, and 16 of that was a replenishment of what had been expended from the CCC, which was going to happen anyway, quite honestly. So ag has gotten the short end of the stick in these pieces of legislation, the last couple of pieces of legislation that we've passed, as it is. So I don't know where we end up. I respect Colin Peterson. I think he's a good man, and I'm hopeful that we can get to an agreement. I don't know how and I don't disagree with him that the Ag Committee should have more input into how the funds are actually expended from the different agencies. And I would say I think that's the way it should be with all agencies, not just the USDA. I also think that our secretary did probably as good a job as he could have done with the money that he had. Now, I don't know anybody that was happy with what actually happened, but I think that the end result of the unhappiness was just a flat out, the shortage of the money that was there. But I don't know what changes have to be made to Colin's original language for us to get there. My main thing is long term getting the number raised so that there is more support for agriculture across the United States. And I think the thing that's different right now is for the first time in most Americans' lives, they walked into the grocery store and saw empty shelves. And virtually every American out there recognizes the vulnerability of our food supply. And so we've got an opportunity now to get the support for agriculture that we need. And we need to find that common ground and take advantage of it. So I listen, Colin's a friend of mine. We'll work hand in hand to try to get that language right.
Right. And you're obviously talking about this tough farm economy. I know it's difficult across many parts of the country, including in Georgia as well. Economists are already warning that next year could be a very difficult year, maybe even harder than this year. Could you provide any assurance that the farmers will be able to count on additional ad hoc payments in some form, another coronavirus program or MFP or whatever? And a second, is the Farm Bill the 2018 Farm Bill, is it just inadequate? Does it need to be replaced?
Absolutely, the Farm Bill needs to be replaced. And to be candid with you, I'm a Republican. I don't think either party has really been good to the ag producers over the last several farm bills. If you look at the debates we have a tremendous number of people on both sides that want to actually reduce the payment limits and the other things. Well, the fact of the matter is 80% of the U.S. food supply comes from somewhere around 10% of the U.S. farmers. Well, those are the ones that are impacted the most by that upper payment limit. So the difference today and 5 years ago is that I think that America recognizes that food security is national security. And for the first time in generations, they walked into the grocery store and seen the shelves empty. And they realized that we are vulnerable. And while we get our groceries for the most part from a grocery store or from a restaurant, we understand that we want those groceries grown in America. And so when you walk out of the grocery store, about 8 cents of every dollar that you spend on groceries actually goes to the farmer. Someone else is getting over 90 cents of that dollar. And the question is twofold. How do we get more of that dollar down to the actual producer, and make sure that production agriculture stays in America? And part of that comes in the processing and other things, and part of it comes in the form of the government having adequate safety nets so that our farmers can buy insurance products that limit their downside risk.
So do you think Congress should reopen the Farm Bill or just flat out write a new Farm Bill next year?
I think we should flat out write a new Farm Bill. Our vulnerabilities have been exposed. And I can tell you the people who don't like America, who live outside of America, have seen those vulnerabilities. Some of the things that we need to be talking about that those of us in the ag community have been talking about that others haven't, have been, when the Federal Trade Commission and other federal agencies have allowed the consolidations of mid-sized companies into super-sized companies, and then you turn around and you see foreign entities purchase those companies. We have a vulnerability in our seed supply and our chemical supply and others, and the amount of influence that China has all the way through the meat packing industry. And as much bad as has come out of the coronavirus, for the first time, people who have never paid any attention to those issues that those of us on the Ag Committee talk about, they're awake and they're talking about them, and they want solutions to them.
Congressman, I want to wrap up talking about one of those, almost an unintended consequence or reaction to the coronavirus, and that being a lot of the focus in the medical field, obviously, on prevention and treatment of the coronavirus. And that has led to a lot of cancellation of elective surgeries, which were a big part of the bottom lines for a lot of these rural hospitals. So going forward, what should we expect you and Congress more broadly to do to address the situation that rural hospitals currently find themselves in?
Yeah, so we've got very serious problems in rural healthcare. You've got a couple of issues. One is, in many cases, the insurance carriers, while they cannot discriminate against an individual because of pre-existing conditions, they can simply choose not to write in a zip code. And so we've got situations in my state where in many of the counties that I represent, you have no competition at all in the insurance field. And therefore, because prices are significantly higher, people simply don't buy it. And so you have a problem with people moving out of rural America simply because the prices are cheaper for health insurance in other areas. That leaves you with a higher percentage of uninsured in the rural parts of America. We've got a couple of things specifically that we've tried to do. We tried to get CMS and Medicare to simply maintain the same level of cash flow for the rural providers, even though the procedures were not being done. The cash flow that comes from Medicare and Medicaid procedures is an extremely important part of the revenue of the rural hospitals. It's a significantly larger percentage of the revenue for a rural hospital than it is for a metropolitan hospital. And through some additional payments and through some grants and other things, there has been some help for the rural hospitals. Now, I'm not sure that helps enough. And let's just remember, we can't have the rural hospitals and the rural healthcare community if we don't have the physicians in rural America, because the hospitals and the physicians are a partnership and they have to be there together. And if one of them isn't there, the other one's not going to be there. And so there was very little done for physicians in the rural communities. And if the hospitals didn't choose to continue to pay the physicians, in many cases, the physicians obviously didn't get paid at all. Well, that's a problem. And so as we deal with rural healthcare, I think it's going to come through. I think you'll see us continue to try to do grants, but when we do those grants and we do those payments, we have to remember that the other providers, not just the hospitals, have to get paid as well.
So obviously a lot of things on the agenda, a lot of things to consider in the broad scheme of American agriculture this week, a lot of things going on, and would encourage you to stop by agripulse.com to stay up to date on the latest of the issues. But in terms of how those issues impact the state of Georgia, Congressman Scott, we appreciate you taking a little bit of time to join us here this week.
Thanks for what you guys do.
For Phil Brasher and Congressman Austin Scott, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.